Some courtroom moments are so shocking, they take the internet by storm. From explosive outbursts to jaw-dropping confessions, these viral moments will leave you speechless. Let's get right into it. On June 15, 2017, a Boardman woman was found dead and riddled with bullet holes on Market Street, Youngstown, Ohio. And it was the beginning of a really long and painful trial for the family of the victim. Elizabeth Pledger Stewart was the victim of the entire situation. And the man who initiated it all by murdering her is 59-year-old Dale Williams. He was apprehended by Youngstown police after forcing Elizabeth's car off the road, causing a crash, and then firing multiple shots at her until his gun was empty. All of this happened during the day, and according to one witness who refused to reveal her identity, Dale Williams had waited in an alley 45 minutes before he chased and killed Elizabeth in the middle of the street with witnesses present. It seems like he wasn't considering the consequences of what he did. Elizabeth was 46 years old when she was chased by Dale, who was later revealed to be her boyfriend. He didn't just wake up and decide to kill her. It was revealed that Elizabeth had filed a report to the police the night before Dale killed her. She told police just 11 hours before that Dale was upset and was angrily accusing her of seeing someone else. Before then, he told her he was going to catch her in the streets before he proceeded to chase her the next day, where she was probably trying to run away from Dale. He chased her with his van until he crashed into the back of her car. The police caught him in the act of emptying his bullets into Elizabeth's body, where they arrested him and took him to court. Williams was charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, felonious assault, and having weapons under disability. Elizabeth had 3 children, a 14-year-old girl and 2 other male children whose ages were not mentioned. When the trial began, her 14-year-old daughter was ready to give her statement. However, as that time came closer, it didn't take long for the court to realize her 2 sons, Anthony D. and Jerome Stewart, had other plans besides seeing their mother's murderer standing without anything threatening his life, so they decided to change that. The 2 men lunged at Dale Williams and began attacking him until they were subdued by deputies. One of them had to be stopped with a taser, which led to Elizabeth's aunt, Janet Dees, freaking out and screaming at Dale Williams, as well as the deputies after they hit one of Stewart's sons. This disruption caused the court session to be postponed till the next week, where Janet Dees finally had a chance to say everything she had been holding in.
We saw him, his face, we felt it was so much emotion due to a flashback of how he just killed my niece.
By the time the trial was over, 2 years later, 62-year-old Dale Williams was sentenced to anywhere from 23 years to life imprisonment. He had no reaction to his sentence when it was read to him. As for Anthony and Stewart, the disruption they caused earned them a few weeks behind bars. They spent 30 days in prison for contempt of court, but it must have been worth it because Dale was going to be in prison for so long that they may never see him alive again. Watching a murderer stand calmly after taking a life can push anyone to the edge. And in Michael Madison's case, it's hard to blame a grieving parent for losing control. No one should be punished for an emotional outburst in the face of such a tragedy. Michael Madison, a serial killer who faced multiple charges such as 3 counts of murder, sexually motivated aggravated murder, kidnapping among others, was definitely not expecting to be attacked in court after what he did. Between 2012 and 2013, under 9 months, Michael had killed 3 women in Ohio before he was arrested. He was read his charges and the potential punishment for each of his charges before he was sent to court. Madison was born on October 15, 1977, to parents Diane Madison and John Baldwin. He was the result of an accidental pregnancy, and Baldwin claimed that he was not the father of Madison. Madison would grow up with his mother and her boyfriends, who all mistreated him as he was growing up. Not much was known about Madison until 2013, when someone requested that the police examine the case of foul odor that was coming from a garage that had been rented to Madison. Upon entering, they found a decomposing body inside and 2 more in a backyard and the basement of an empty house. The bodies were all wrapped in plastic bags, and they were all in close proximity to Madison's house. Eventually, the police got a search warrant to search Madison's house, where they found evidence tying him to the murder of these women. After a short standoff at his mother's house, Madison was arrested. The victims were identified as Shatisha Sheely, 28, Angela Deskins, 38, and Sherelda Helen Terry, 18. Madison confessed to kidnapping, killing, abuse of corpse, assault, and mutilation of the 3 women. The details of what he did to them are too gruesome to describe.
How you doing, Your Honor? My name is Van Terry. Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown.
Van Terry lost all composure when Madison smirked at him, showing no remorse whatsoever. He jumped at Madison and was quickly stopped by deputies before the session was stopped for a short period, before order was restored with the help of the police. The jury delivered no mercy for Madison as expected, so it was not a shock when Judge Nancy McDonnell announced that there was a unanimous decision to give him the death penalty. After his sentence was read and Madison was led away, the parents of the victims expressed their feelings upon seeing their daughter's murderer pay for his crimes. Madison continued to pay for his crimes as he awaited his execution in prison. It was learned that the inmates of the jail he was sent to severely beat and injured him after they discovered what he did. He was hospitalized for 2 months before he was sent back to jail. However, when he got there, he was again slapped and had his head smashed on a desk for his crimes. 3 years after he was sentenced, his mother, Diane Madison, was killed from multiple stab wounds by her 28-year-old grandson, Jalen Plummer, who pleaded guilty to all charges. If you thought Michael Madison faced a family's fury, wait until you hear about Diamond Alvarez. Her family's relentless fight for justice will leave you stunned, showing just how far loved ones will go to make a convict feel their pain.
As Diamond Alvarez's mother began walking towards De Leon, a bailiff holds her back. That's when the situation escalates, with Diamond's uncle jumping in from the gallery and punching De Leon. De Leon's mother then jumps in and pushes Diamond's mother at one point, and the two fight in front of the judge.
Diamond Alvarez was unfortunately not around to witness just how much her family was ready to risk it all for her after her killer showed no remorse for the horrible end he gave her. Diamond Alvarez was 16 years old when she was brutally murdered by 19-year-old Frank Delian Jr. outside her home. On January 11, 2023, 16-year-old Diamond was shot 22 times when she took her dog for a walk. Her family heard gunshots and the family called the police after their dog came back home without Diamond. Her family went to search for her, and her brother found her just before she passed away. According to her family, Diamond died in her mother's arms after they did all they could to save her. Investigations showed that the two were on the verge of a breakup when Frank shot her. The two were in a relationship when Diamond found out that Frank had been cheating on her and was in a relationship with someone else. They had dated for about 6 months before they broke up. Even though his murder trial began almost 10 months after he killed Diamond, he didn't show up to the first day of his trial. This caused many people to ask questions, and law enforcement officers confirmed that he was in custody. They said the reason he had missed the first day of his murder trial was because he had gotten into a car crash on his way to the court that day and had to be taken to the hospital to get treated for the wound. However, since he didn't show up to his first day, he forfeited the $250,000 bond for his bail. After his bail was posted, he was released, and Diamond's mother was fearful as he lived close to her. She said they had received threats after they had demanded justice for their daughter. After he didn't show up, he was sent to a county jail after he was released from the hospital. He was eventually charged, and Anna Mikado, Diamond's mother, had to appear in court for the trial. It would have been a painful but calm trial if Diamond's family had not snapped from the despicable attitude that Frank had displayed. He had shown no remorse whatsoever, and this caused Diamond's mother to lose it. As she was giving her statement, Diamond's mother told Frank how she felt about what he did to her daughter. Frank smirked at her, and nobody knew what Diamond's mother was doing until she started moving fast towards Frank. She was stopped before she could get close to him, but that didn't stop Frank from almost getting mauled by the rest of the family. While Diamond's mother was being stopped, her uncle sprinted to where Frank was standing and jumped at him fully with the intent of attacking. Frank's mother responded to this and tried to defend her son by attacking Diamond's mother, which caused Diamond's aunt to attack and try to beat Frank's mother. Her uncle was taken into custody, but he was eventually released without being charged with anything.
That was wrong of us because we're not monsters. But it's so much hate because I want my daughter back. And what he did it was horrible.
Eventually, Frank accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 45 years in prison for the murder of Diamond Alvarez. The judge and jury ruled that Frank had to spend at least half of his sentence in jail before he was eligible for parole. It would seem that Diamond's family had other plans to attack Frank, but he was quickly taken away before they decided to risk it all and attack him again. The emotional responses of these people are more than enough to consider permanently allowing convicts to be hit at least once by the grieving families. Frank DeLeon Jr. narrowly avoided the family's wrath, but Jeremy Christian wasn't intimidated by anyone. The man you just watched is Jeremy Christian. He was found guilty of murdering 2 people in Portland, Oregon. Christian had gone on a rant on a train when he spotted 2 girls on May 26, 2017. He confronted them in what was described as extreme hatred. The girls, who were 17 years old, had been on this train before Christian got up and started saying that they should go back home. He also told them that they were nothing and that they should kill themselves for that reason. Jeremy said a series of insults that could only be described as someone who was very unstable. As Christian continued his full tirade on the young girls, bystanders became irritated with his actions and harassment, so they decided to stop him. However, the men who tried their best to stop him got worse than the girls. Taliesin Mearden Namkaimesh and David Cole Fletcher had tried to prevent Christian from harassing the 2 girls. According to a witness, Namkaimesh had angrily told Christian to get off the train. When Christian refused to get off the train, Fletcher and Namkaimesh decided to shield the girls from Christian. Fletcher then attempted to push him away so he could step back. Christian fell backward and threatened to harm Fletcher if he touched him again. That was when the situation completely escalated. Jeremy stabbed Ricky Best, another man who was nearby, in the chest, and slashed Namkaimesh and Fletcher with the knife. CCTV showed Christian running away from the scene of the murders. Ricky Best died at the scene, and Namkaimesh eventually died at a local hospital. Fletcher survived with critical wounds, and the girls who they were protecting fled the scene as soon as the train stopped. If Jeremy was ready to show remorse for what he did, it wasn't when he was finally arrested a mile away from the crime scene. Christian was recorded at the back of the patrol car he was transported in saying,
I'm all good. I kept next. I'm happy now. I'm happy now. I can rest easy. Have a good one.
Christian said he was happy that he had stabbed both Namkaimesh and Fletcher in the neck, and he did his part as a patriot. Jeremy Christian was charged with aggravated and attempted murder, as well as a felony of possessing a restricted weapon. During one of the trials, one of the women that Christian had harassed on the train gave a victim impact statement, and this caused him to throw a tantrum. He shouted multiple slurs and insulted the judge and the people in the courtroom. It seems that Christian was saying that the woman who had given a victim impact statement should have experienced the same thing Floyd did if he had gotten the chance to do the same to her. After his multiple tantrums and tirades in the courtroom, he was eventually escorted out of the courtroom while he was screaming and yelling insensitive remarks. When Christian's sentence was read, he wasn't in the courtroom. He was given 2 consecutive life sentences, which eventually came up to 51.5 years in prison. What is baffling is that this wasn't the first time that Christian had attempted what he did on the train. The day before he attacked the victims on the train, he had made threats on another train and threw a bottle at a woman. She maced him in retaliation before he got off the train. Now, If you thought that Jeremy Christian was disrespectful to the court, wait until you see the disgusting, unhygienic, and disrespectful habit that Bass Webb brought into the courtroom.
There's no way I want to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I have to see you for one further second. Set for the very hearing next week.
The story of this convicted criminal, Bass Webb, will shock you when you realize just how evil a man can get. Bass Webb was accused of causing the death of 2 of his ex-girlfriends in the space of 10 years. He was also charged with running over a pretrial officer and a deputy sheriff for fun after he made a shocking and brutal confession. The reason Webb went to the county jail in the first place was because he had gone to tell the officers that he had just murdered his 31-year-old girlfriend, Bria Runewitz, by beheading her. When the officers tried to stop him, he jumped into the car and tried to escape. Some footage released from Bourbon County Jail showed Webb speeding through the parking lot to hit the 2 officials. One of them got out of the way in time, but the other was not so lucky. The officer sustained injuries, and Webb was caught and arrested after a brief chase. A week later, Webb was arraigned in court for assaulting these officers and murdering Runewitz, appearing in front of Judge Vanessa Dixon of Kentucky County. If Bass ever showed any form of remorse before entering the courtroom, he didn't have any when he got into the courtroom. Judge Dixon told him that she was removing herself from the case because she knew the officials that were attacked. Webb's response was extremely shocking.
Can you hear what you're saying?
Yeah.
That be yes?
Yes.
No way I want to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I have to see you for one further second. Set for the very hearing next week.
Webb spat on the judge and she wiped her face before Webb was escorted from the courtroom. In September 2013, Webb was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of his girlfriend. He was called to the courtroom again in July 2014 to receive the punishment for assaulting the officers at the county jail. He was sentenced to 37 years in prison for this offense. Now, if you thought that was all, you would be wrong. Webb was not only a habitual offender, he had done something equally terrible a long time ago. In 2003, Sabrina Vaughn disappeared and her remains weren't found for 7 years. In 2010, after Webb was arrested and awaiting trial, the remains of Vaughn were found buried on a property that belonged to Webb's family. His family had requested a plea deal because they claimed that he was suffering from mental trauma. However, Webb refused to answer the court's order to get a psychological evaluation. When he was eventually tried for this murder in May 2017, Webb showed up with a more disrespectful attitude and look.
A closer look at Webb's recent head tattoos reveals a demented murder hit list. It reads, "Those that must die, all judges, all prosecutors, all cops, the media." Below that, 3 rats have been scratched out, and many more.
During the trial, Webb's behavior showed that he had no respect for the court or remorse for what he did. He was sentenced to life in prison with no option of parole. Initially, he had been granted parole on the condition that he served 20 years in prison. This exemption was canceled during his trial. Webb is being held at the Kentucky Department of Corrections for the rest of his life. Bass Webb's actions in the courtroom were disrespectful to the judge and other law enforcement agents. Wait until you see what Ricky Hand snuck into the courtroom.
You just gave it 4 years. Well, guess what? Sir, don't say this again.
Showing up to receive sentencing for a previous crime should have been all that Ricky Hand got in the courtroom the day of his sentencing, not adding more years to them. In Springfield, Ohio, 46-year-old Ricky Hand was being sentenced for multiple robberies committed over a significant period of time. He had robbed multiple convenience stores at night where he made away with money and other things. Ricky had committed up to 30 robberies and had been arrested for some of them. He was out on parole when he committed the one that put him back in the courtroom. He had attempted to rob John's drive-thru one night. The store owner was closing for the night, oblivious to the fact that an armed Ricky Hand was lurking around the building, waiting for his opportunity to strike. However, as Ricky made his way to the door, the store owner was waiting for him, armed as well, and began to fire at Ricky to scare him off.
This is John's drive-thru, West Main Street. A guy just tried to rob me and I shot him. He ran out the back door.
Okay, is he injured?
I think I hit him.
It didn't take long before Ricky had to get the bullet wound treated, so he went to a hospital. It was at this hospital that Ricky was arrested for attempting to rob the shop. He admitted to robbing the store, and the case was taken to the courtroom. Ricky was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and the reason he was given such a lengthy sentence was because he had pleaded guilty to 7 robberies earlier in 2016.
Did you just give me 40 years, sir? Yes. You just gave me 40 years. Well, guess what? Sir, what's this?
In retaliation, Ricky pulled out bottles that contained his feces and urine, which he flung at his attorney and the officers around. He was quickly tackled and subdued by the deputies present. As a result of this action, Ricky Hand was charged with an additional 5 counts of harassment with bodily substance. He had attacked his attorney and 4 deputies with his waist. He was also charged with obstructing official business and retaliation. The fact that he had stored these bottles in his arm sling caused the judge to ask that the law enforcement agents intensify their searches before letting anyone into the courtroom next time. Ricky Hand's actions were appalling, but Adrian Dunn took on the officers right in the courtroom.
That courtroom scuffle marked the end to a murder case that began in the parking lot of this apartment complex.
Yelling profanities in the courtroom will always be classified as a shocking behavior to exhibit, no matter the situation. However, Adrian Dunn considered it to be good enough after he was given the verdict. The clip you just saw is of Adrian Dunn. He faced murder charges in San Antonio in 2012. Adrian was an ex-convict who found himself in the courthouse once more for shooting and killing Rakeem Tarek Charles. According to the police, Adrian shot Rakeem in the back once in an apartment parking lot after a deal went wrong between them on July 16, 2012. Killing someone else is already a horrible thing to do, but to make matters worse, this wasn't Adrian's first rodeo. During his trial, a prosecutor named Nicole Phillips told the jury that he had been arrested and sent to prison twice after he murdered Rakeem. Before that, Adrian had also committed another shooting before he killed Rakeem. The prosecutors who were involved in the trial petitioned the jury to give the maximum sentence to Adrian because not only did he have a long history of crime and violence, but he also showed no remorse for his actions. Another prosecutor, Jason Goss, can be seen holding the hand of the victim's parents while arguing to the jury that Adrian should be sentenced to life in prison, as it was necessary to prevent something like that from ever happening again. Killing someone is horrible, and not showing remorse for taking another person's life makes everything even worse. Anybody should do their best not to add to their crimes after this one. Except Adrian's reactions showed that he regretted nothing. During the trial, Adrian's reactions and behaviors were likened to those of someone who was bored of being in a classroom. He showed no remorse and kept moving and squirming around in his seat with an unrepentant and nonchalant look on his face.
Don't give Adrian a chance to go into prison and try to make something of himself so that when he gets out, if he ever gets out, he can try to be an asset to our community.
Despite his attorney's argument, the jury deliberated for 2 hours before they agreed that the appropriate sentence for Adrian was life in prison. As the jury's decision was read out, Adrian began to wrestle with several Bexar County Sheriff's deputies who were attempting to escort him outside the courtroom. Adrian's reaction was uncalled for and very disrespectful to the memory of his victim and their parents, but compared to what TJ Lane, the next convict in our list, did, you could call Adrian's reaction a walk in the park.
Moments after entering the courtroom, Ohio school shooter TJ Lane took off his shirt. Underneath was a t-shirt with the word killer handwritten on it.
On the morning of the 26th of February, 2012, 6 students were shot in the cafeteria of Chardon High School in Ohio. 3 of them ended up dead with 2 others hospitalized, one of which ended up permanently paralyzed. The perpetrator, 17-year-old sophomore Thomas T.J. Lane III. Lane was a former student of Chardon High who had switched to Lake Academy Alternative School for special students, but used the same bus as most of the victims. At around 7:30 a.m. local time, Lane stood up in the Chardon High School cafeteria and began shooting toward 5 male students at a table with a .22 caliber handgun. And as he fled while being chased by a couple of teachers, he shot at another victim, this time a female student. Lane was eventually identified and arrested by police outside the school near his car, which was parked close by. Of his 6 victims, 3 managed to survive, including 17-year-old Nick Walsack, who was shot several times, but the other 3 weren't so lucky. According to student witnesses, Lane had something of a rivalry with one of the victims, Russell King Jr., because he had recently begun dating Lane's ex-girlfriend. Since Lane was under the age of 18 and not formally charged as an adult, he was considered by the law as a juvenile, and a detention hearing, rather than a trial, was held for him on the 28th of February, 2012. Lane apparently had a history of juvenile delinquency, and after his arrest, the presiding judge allowed the release of his juvenile records to the press. The records revealed that Lane had been arrested twice in December 2009, once for assisting an assault on his uncle and the other for committing an assault himself. Prosecutors indicated that they wanted Lane charged as an adult, and eventually on the 1st of March 2012, he was formally charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. However, the judge postponed the decision for Lane to get a mental competency evaluation. Lane was finally indicted on all 6 charges that June, and months later, on the 26th of February 2013, the 1-year anniversary of the shootings, Lane pled guilty to the charges with his sentencing hearing date set for the 19th of March 2013. However, on the day of his sentencing, Lane's behavior would send shockwaves throughout the court. After he entered the courtroom, he removed his dress shirt to reveal a white t-shirt which had the word "killer" handwritten across the front. And not only that, Lane also smiled and smirked at the judge and the victims' families throughout the hearing. Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. But after being sentenced, Lane would once again shock the courtroom. This time, he uttered a quite graphic statement about the murder of his victims to their families before hitting them with the F word and throwing up a middle finger to the attendees.
In Ohio, a teenager convicted of a high school shooting that killed 3 students is back in custody after daring escape overnight. TJ Lane climbed a prison fence last night with 2 prison inmates.
The story of Thomas Lane wasn't over, however, and on the 11th of September 2014, he escaped from the Allen Correctional Institution, along with 2 other inmates using a makeshift ladder. Lane was eventually captured near the woods a day later and then transferred to the Ohio State Supermax Penitentiary. Today, Lane spends his days behind bars at the Southern Ohio Maximum Security Correctional Facility and will probably be there for the rest of his life. Disrespecting the victims and their families in a way that has never been seen will be the exclusive title of TJ Lane, but a violent reaction from Jaleel Hoskins is violent enough to make it onto our list. On March 19, 2013, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a 26-year-old woman and mother of 5 named Latrice Mays was declared missing. Less than 2 months later, the police in Grand Rapids had reason to believe that her body had been burned and dumped in a landfill after her murderer put it in a dumpster. The murderer in question turned out to be her boyfriend, 25-year-old Jaleel Hoskins. Latrice Mays' family wanted to know her whereabouts, and attempts to find her soon became a nationwide search. At first, Hoskins kept on insisting that he knew nothing about her disappearance and had nothing to do with her death. He was interviewed by a TV reporter 24 hours after he was arrested and answered questions that marked the beginning of a trying period for Mays' family.
I wouldn't, like I say, at this point in time, I wouldn't even say a murder because, like I say, I mean, to everyone's knowledge, no, I have nothing to do with the murder. I have nothing to do with the disappearance.
It didn't take long before Hoskins changed his story about knowing nothing about the murder of Mays after he saw the level of evidence and testimonials that pointed to his involvement. Hoskins' cousin testified to the court that Hoskins had told him that he choked her before wrapping her body in a blanket he had taken from her daughter's room.
He just told me that he put her in a garbage can.
In the what?
Garbage can.
Hoskins' cousin was also charged with perjury because he had lied before he confessed to doing so. He claimed to have done so to protect his cousin. Hoskins was supposed to face assault charges after he stabbed the man who is the father of 2 of Mays' children. He had stabbed him outside a bar and allegedly killed Mays because he thought she was going to go to the police. One of Hoskins' friends said that Hoskins had asked him for help to dump Maze's body because he couldn't carry her himself.
I need some help. I can't carry her by myself.
Another crucial piece of the evidence was a police dash cam picking up audio when the said police officer responded to a call from the home where Maze was last seen. The call had claimed that Hoskins was abusing Maze and that she needed help.
You ride to a friend? I can take you to a shelter, but I can't force you to leave.
When Hoskins realized that there was overwhelming evidence against him, he switched up his story and pleaded guilty to the murder of Latrice Maze. He delivered an emotional speech as he wept while he was confessing to what he did to Maze. He also admitted to tampering with evidence. He took Maze's life because he thought that Maze was going to report him to the police after she reported domestic abuse earlier that day. Initially, Hoskins was charged with open murder, which usually resulted in life in prison without any possibility of parole. The reason Maze cooperated was because she feared losing custody of the children she had with Hoskins if she reported him for an assault. Hoskins was eventually sentenced to 50 to 100 years in prison for murder, habitual crime, perjury, and tampering with evidence. Hoskins' reaction caused the courtroom to erupt into chaos like you've never seen before. After he was read his sentence, Hoskins reacted violently by throwing the podium towards the judge before he was escorted out. He was seen with his eyes bulging with fury. This reaction caused a struggle between Maze's and Hoskins' families, where they began to yell at each other as Hoskins was led to where he would serve his sentence. The drama doesn't stop here. Up next, we've got more unforgettable courtroom moments that you won't believe are real. Stay tuned for the twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat.